Hi, Colum. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm fine. Where are you exactly? Because you look like in some sort of room somewhere. I don't know. It's a
I
hotel room
am.
where.
Guess what? I'm in a hotel in Florida, 3 blocks
Mhm.
from Ernest Hemingway's house.
Okay, that's
Uh,
the right place at
so
the
it's
right
okay. I
moment.
wish I was
Okay.
in Ernest Hemingway's house right now, but they
Okay.
wouldn't allow me the internet connection.
Okay. That's a good reason not to be there. So listen, as I wrote you on the email, I bought your book. You can see here the original edition in New York. The last day I was allowed to stay because of the COVID situation. So I went to Shakespeare and Company and is assigned first edition. So my first question is very important. Is this your real autograph? Can you see it?
That is my signature, and it's in fact I
Okay.
did it in a
Okay.
gold pen. So
Oh, of course.
because the
It's
cover
a
is
golden
beautiful
book.
as well. I just like the
Yeah.
Italian covers.
Yeah, all of them I see have birds because birds are very important for this kind of novel, I guess. No? So, to
Yeah.
start the conversation, you have written many books, and I think I've read all of them. And you
Wow.
went from Ireland to New York to the Middle East, following the famous dancer Nureyev, the guy who worked on The Wire, Philippe Petit, and now two guys in Israel and Palestine. Is there a common path among your books apart from your writing? Because apparently you go from one situation to another following, I don't know, your curiosity, your interest, your urgency to write. But what is the common path among these different books?
The most honest answer is that I don't know. I have no
Okay.
clue, and I don't want to know, because if I knew, I would avoid it, because I find myself wanting to be somebody who goes on adventures, and an adventurer, an explorer into new territory every time. I get obsessed by an idea, and then I follow it. But if I knew exactly what it was that was pushing me into a particular story, except I want to write something that might possibly break your heart or break my own heart, or as Yeats would have said, a fascination with what is difficult. Um, and in that sense, I try to explore as much as I possibly can. But it's up to the readers, who are much smarter than me, and the scholars, who are infinitely smarter than me, and of course my publishers, to navigate what this stuff means. I like to paint a landscape, and then the reader walks into it.
Okay. But this one particular landscape was very daring, very risky, because you went in the Middle East of all places. And as usual, when you are not one of them, so you're not an Israeli, you're a Palestinian, you are not someone who lived there for a long time, it's very easy to face some kind of criticism. Like people say, okay, this is cultural appropriation and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
how come you decided to risk such a different and such a difficult task like writing about something that happened in the Middle East?
I knew it was difficult. I knew I would face criticism. I knew I was prepared to face criticism. I'll very briefly, confront this, idea of cultural appropriation, which is incredibly important, because everybody who talks about cultural appropriation, they are entirely correct.
Hmm.
Writers have gone in, artists have gone in, corporations have gone in to other places, and they have patronized, they've condescended, they have plundered, they have taken, and they've done so without conscience, at times. At the same time, and perhaps on the exact same hand, there's also a thing called, that I feel we should talk about, which is called cultural celebration, the idea of cultural
Hmm.
celebration, where we go in and we bow our heads and we say, I don't know. I want to know.
Okay.
I need to know. Can you please help me know? Can you reduce my stupidity? Can you deal with some of my confusion? Can you make me a better person by telling me your story? And in that way, we sort of broaden the lungs, of the world. But going into the Middle East, going into the Israel and Palestine, I knew from the very, very beginning that it was going to be difficult. But I was taken by this incredible story of these two men, which is a true story, and I thought that I could do it justice, and I could do my own confusion justice as well, because I mean that's one of the attempts that one of the things that the book tries to say is it is okay to be confused. It is okay to say, I don't know, and to enter the landscape of the human heart in a different way, without being didactic, without saying this is the only way that you should think.
So confusion was one of your purpose when you started writing this book, because before we start digging into the two characters, who are the main characters of the book, like the reader is really confused because it's wonderful, but you don't know where you're going. You are in some sort of labyrinth. You go from the last dinner of Francois Mitterrand to the symphony of John Cage, and then I think it's around page 40 or something like that you finally arrive knowing these two characters. So what was the point and how was arranged this confusion? Because I don't think it's like you throw stuff in the book because you liked it. There was a plan. You had a project somehow.
Yeah. To me, it was like writing a symphony, and I had to get every note perfect. But I was the conductor of a grand symphony, and all of these images and all of these ideas were coming into the hall to play their own instruments. There was a cello here, and a piano there, and a contrabass there. And then every now and then at the very end of the hallway, as I was conducting the symphony, a new instrument would come in and carrying a case and a shape of an instrument that I'd never seen before. And I had to incorporate that music into what was going on. This, I will tell you, it took me 5 years to write the book, but the beginning of the book is, I could show you the beginning pages. It's almost, almost the exact same as when I began it. And I didn't, this sounds silly, but I didn't end the book until I ended the book. I didn't know how I was going to end. And so in that sense, no plan, but I was operating on desire, on faith, and on the fumes of these two very important men who I feel are, that I had to be honest to their story. But I also had to make it your story and my story. And in so doing, I used the metaphor of birds coming from Ireland, from Italy, from South Africa, from Sweden, all flying over the pathway of Israel and Palestine. And, we're all there. We're all complicit. We're all involved. And that was very important to me.
And you already knew from the beginning that you were going to write 1001 paragraphs or whatever you want to call it, or it came on the way, but this was the structure. Okay. Yeah. So it came away, but weren't you scared about when you had this idea, 1001 different story, different part of the story? Like, it's a very complex architecture of this book, one of the most complex I've ever read in my life. So it wasn't, and then we go to something even more frightening, but this wasn't frightening when you were, I don't know, 300 and say, okay, I want to go to 1001.
Yeah, I was terrified, completely terrified. I wasn't sure that I was ever going to make it. But one of the reasons I ended up doing it in 1001 chapters was, or cantos, was because Rami and Bassam, they tell the story of their daughters over and over and over again. And I realized about 2 years into the project, when I knew I wanted to write a fractured novel, I realized, oh, they're telling their story because it's kind of Scheherazade-like. They're telling the stories in order to keep their daughters alive. And that's when I knew that particular structure had to be the thing that I took on. But it was very, very difficult. It wasn't as if I just took everything in from the saucepan and threw it in and threw it down. Everything is very carefully calibrated to, to echo one thing onto the other. In fact, I talked with my Italian translator, Marinella, who is amazing, and we talked a lot about rhythm and about music and about meaning. And for me, sometimes music is sometimes more important than meaning.
Yeah, there's a quote in your book among 1001 we could quote. It says that music is a liquid architecture and architecture is frozen music. And I think in a way your book is a musical architecture because you said as a rhythm, and this rhythm is in a structure. So it's not like a spare rhythm. It cannot go any way it wants, but it has to follow a path. But for the people who didn't read the book or doesn't know about the book, you are already telling about these two guys. So you were in Israel or Palestine with Narrative 4. And one night you met these two guys. Who were they?
Rami, who is Israeli, and Bassam, who is Palestinian. Rami lost his daughter to a suicide bomber in 1997. Bassam lost his daughter to an Israeli rubber bullet in the back of the head in 2007. They met through a group called Combatants for Peace. They became the best of friends, and they have been so now for the past 15 years. And they travel around the world, and they've gone to Italy. They go around Israel. They go around the West Bank, and they tell the story of their daughters in order as to acknowledge language as sort of a weapon in a way, to acknowledge their grief as a way to understand one another. They're incredibly courageous people. I align them with, say, Arundhati Roy, the Indian writer, or with George Mitchell, Peacemaker, or Martin Luther King, or Mahatma Gandhi. In my estimation, they are as important as some of the most major figures in the confrontation of peace.
Well, when they tell the story, they are always together. Like Bassam is where Rami is, because the story makes sense. I mean, make a lot more sense if they are together. So if the Israeli can tell the story and forgive, and the Palestinian as well. So they told you the story that night, and you said that it was already 15 years they were going around and telling the story, but you were the first one who said, I want to write about this. But the idea came immediately, or it was like after that?
Well, I have to say that I wasn't the first one to write about it. There have been many articles written, but I felt like I was the first.
Article is different. Like this is a novel. Like it makes it like being forever. It's not like something you throw away the next day. All due respect to newspaper.
Yeah, although one of the things that interests me is that journalism does not get thrown away anymore. And I'm the son of a journalist, and I I actually feel myself to be a journalist, and I make no distinction between being a poet and a novelist, or being a novelist and a playwright. The most important thing is putting down the word in the most profound and musical way, so that people can hear it and enter it and be part of it. But that did mean, unlike a journalist, I had to work for 5 years on this particular piece. But for me, meeting them, the fact that they gave me their story, I mean, this is truly extraordinary, that they allowed me to go ahead. So I went to them. I said, okay, I want to write a book about you guys. And they said, okay. And I said, okay, but do you realize I'm a novelist? And they said, yeah. And I said, you realize that I'm going to make things up about you? And they said, as long as it's true, we will understand. And that was really important. The difference between fact and texture, honesty and truth. I think this is very much an honest book. I think it's true to their experience. And was the most important thing for me, to be true to their actual lived experience. So there are certain things that I change, certain tiny things that I change.
Like the motorcycle gear.
Exactly. Also, one thing that I did that was, that this is difficult. I broke or Bassam's hunger strike. So Bassam is the Palestinian. He goes to prison for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, he goes on hunger strike for 17 days. At the end of 17 days, he finished his hunger strike. I have him break his hunger strike while in prison. That was an important decision for me. I have him break it with a mint sweet, a candy.
Yeah.
Now his daughter gets killed because she's buying candy, and so it's a literary echo that I think makes the reader feel the hunger strike even more profoundly than if I just said he ended his hunger strike.
But did you discuss with them during the writing process, like I'm going to write this, I'm going to write that, or you went all your way and in the end you gave them the book as it is?
I discussed it with them. So I went across, and I don't think that they knew what it was that I was actually going to do, and I don't think they knew what sort of effect it was going to have. But I mean, they're incredible men, and they said to me, you can do whatever you want to our story. We will still tell our story, and even if you get it wrong, if you get the texture of it right, if you get the main message of it right, we will be happy. But I don't think they were prepared to know that I was going to go so deep down into them. They've been incredibly kind about the book. If you talk to them, they will both say that it captures their hearts and their lives entirely. But I was scared. I was scared a lot during the writing of this novel. I was scared that I wasn't going to be true to their intentions. So I was very careful. I showed it to them, but they didn't necessarily read it. I said, how is it?
I read an interview with Bassam, and at the time he said, I didn't finish yet, because he was kind of, now he has, or he still didn't.
This is the most amazing thing. He read it in Arabic.
Okay.
And that is like, I can't tell you how what that makes me feel. First of all, I never had an Arabic translation before. I've had stories translated and bits and pieces, but never a full novel. On the other hand, I've had every work of mine published in Hebrew. And it was almost impossible to get a Hebrew translation. And so there are a lot of things that are going on here. But when Bassam called me and told me that he had read it in Arabic and he wept, I thought, well, that's what I want to happen. It must be extraordinarily difficult for a man or a woman, anybody, to read about the death of their own child in such an intimate and profound way. Because there are things I do in the book about talking about the velocity of bullets and what happens to the skull when it gets hit in the back of the head and all these things. So he had to relive the death, a second time. And it seems to me tremendously brave that he did so.
Yeah, but you were brave as well, because I think it's one of the most difficult things to do, to write about something that it's so deep, and if you never experience, like the loss of a child, is something, to me, is even impossible to imagine. What does it mean? Like, it's a pain so deep that we don't even have a name for someone who loses the child. No, he's not a widow, he's not an orphan, it's something who lost the child. So we go a long way to tell what happened to this guy. And nevertheless, you said to yourself, this is the story. What made you think this is the story I have to tell in this particular moment of my life?
I never lost a child, and God forbid I ever do. And I do know that it must be the most profound pain that we can engage with. Um, and I know that certain writers. I don't like it when writers say, "Oh, I had to tell a story. There was something mystical that was going on. The characters took control of me." Somebody like Nabokov says, that doesn't happen. The characters are my galley slaves. I get them to do what I want them to do. But for me, this time round, this is my 10th book. It did feel that there was some sort of music in the air, that these children were sitting on my shoulders, one on each shoulder, sort of whispering into my ear. And that was what compelled me. And also, the fascination of what is difficult. And to try to get into the landscape of the human heart. And the book doesn't tell you that you should believe in one state, two states, 8 states, federation, confederation, all of that stuff. That's not up for me to do. There are people much more intelligent than me that can write about that. There are people much more profoundly engaged in the political process who can talk about that. All this book does is it takes a tiny corner of an immense human experience, and it tries to make emotional sense of that. And I think that the reader will understand, or I hope that the reader will understand Israel and Palestine in a new way, because it tries not to say what you should think.
I think it's the New York Times that said this book is an agent of change. You think it's possible for a book to be such a thing, like as an agent of change? What can change a book in people, every sort of people who reads it? Like, really can change the mind of the people about something. I don't say the geopolitical situation, but their heart about.
People change people, and people are driven by stories, and stories are the molecules of the world. I do believe that stories can change the world, yes. Whether my particular story can help inspire another story, that's what I wanted to do. But I do feel that for a long, long time, in particular in relation to the Middle East, there have been ideas that have been forced down upon people, coming from above, from politics, from corporations, even from artists, saying, this is the way it should be. I think that something will come from underneath. A Greta Thunberg who tells a story, who inspires a movement, who inspires change. And in that way, it seems to me that every molecule matters. So every story matters. And if you tell the story in a more compelling way, then that story can have ramifications beyond itself. I believe in literature. I'm old-fashioned that way. I still believe in literature. I still believe in poetry, and I still believe in the act and the art of storytelling. In fact, I think it's the most important thing that we have.
You said you see many angles. That's why the title. I mean, can you explain why the title is? Because in another interview you said only 2 people you met before the book was out knew what this Apeirogon was. So what is the Apeirogon?
Well, so I was writing a book called Transatlantic, which was about the Irish peace process, largely, or it certainly had some of the Irish peace process. And I was looking for a way to say it's not about 2 sides. There's so much more than 2 sides. There's maybe 8 sides, 10 sides. It's polygonal. And in writing about that, I stumbled upon the word Apeirogon, which is a shape with an accountably infinite number of sides. And I thought, wow, that's beautiful, but it's also difficult. And I thought I'll never use it. I'll never use it. But My publishers allowed me to use it. I think it's
Mhm.
incredible that my publishers around the world have allowed me to use it, because I do
So this
think
is
that
the
we need,
title all worldwide. Every translation has the same title, Apeirogon.
even in Arabic.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. But
So it's yeah, and I think that was an important statement to make. I got to tell you, it's a bad title to begin with, but it's a good title to end with. In other words,
okay.
when you look at it in the shop, you think, oh, what's that? Uh,
Yeah.
but after you have read it,
Well,
it's
tell you the truth, I thought it was a bird because
ah,
I saw all these birds on the cover, and I said maybe a peregrine is a bird because I didn't. But the final part made me think of geometry or something like that. I said maybe it's a geometrical bird flying in a geometrical
ah,
sky. I don't know.
that's nice.
But yeah, I think it's better than the translation of one of your novel I really loved, that great word spin. You know what happened to the Italian translation?
Yeah, that we may kiss the
Yeah,
world, or yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
This kiss goes to the old world, which is something totally different. But you think a paragon is like something you can tell about the situation, you can use about the situation in the Middle East, or is true for all of humanity? Aren't we all an apeirogon with
yes,
infinite sides? Aren't me and you a paragon as well? Like,
yes, yes, and that's
so
what's
how
beautiful
can we
about it.
understand a paragon? How is
Yeah,
it possible to understand something so complicated?
it's so complicated the only simplicity that I can bring to it is that we are all part of the shape, and we can land on a finite point in the infinite shape.
Hmm.
Um, and we are all complicit. We're in this together. We touch one another in ways that we don't even know. You know, it's part of the vast complication, but there is local and there is global at the same time too. I actually find it to be a highly optimistic word. That this shape is
Hmm.
infinite, and we're not going to get out of it, but we have a part to play within it, no matter how small that part happens to be. And we can land on a part within it, and understand that part within it too. It's kind of like Borges. I mean, Borges.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of what's going on here is Borgesian. The
Hmm.
infinite library, the Aleph, all of that sort of thing, was certainly in the back of my mind, circling around the back of my mind, as I thought about writing this story. And I also wanted to say um, that I'm involved. I'm guilty.
Hmm.
I live in America, and American money goes towards what's happening, in those checkpoints, in the jeeps, in the occupation, and I am part of the shape, and I must take responsibility for the shape, and it's my duty to know the stories of others across the way. Increasingly, as you know, we're all coming indoors. I
Yeah.
want to. I wish I could bring you outside from this crazy hotel room, because as I said earlier in the interview, uh, I'm 3 blocks from Hemingway's house. If I could walk down the street right now and take this camera with me, and we could walk into Hemingway's house, and then we could read From Whom the Bell Tolls, and then we could go back to Spain, and there's so many directions in which we can go. Um, that it sometimes boggles my mind, the sort
Hmm.
of boundless beauty that we live with, and yet the small lives that we contend with at the same time.
Yeah. We contain multitudes in small boxes, something like that, isn't
Beautiful.
it?
You know,
Yeah.
that's a profoundly important quote. Walt Whitman said, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. And it seems to me that nowadays, I don't know whether we're talking, I mean, I could talk about America and I can talk about Ireland. I don't know if I could talk about Italy. But it seems to me that nowadays we are denying some of our multitudes and shrinking ourselves down. While we have an ability to burst outwards, we're sort of coming indoors and atomizing ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous. And what we
Yeah.
need is politicians, journalists, artists, writers, singers who sort of break open those boundaries and allow us our multitudes
Yeah.
and our mistakes.
Well, can I? Yeah, of course, mistakes, contradiction, many sides. I think it's a recipe to go beyond the situation we are living in. But can I tell you a different story, like a small anecdote connected to the Apeirogon? Like I long ago, I was in Australia, in Sydney, and I took a taxi to go from Sydney to Bondi Beach, which is a beautiful beach on the ocean. It's relaxed, people going surfing and stuff like that. And the taxi driver had the little plaque. He was Palestinian. I could tell from the name because I lived in the area for 3 years. So I spoke a little Arabic with him, and we started talking about the situation. And bear in mind, we were in front of the ocean, the more relaxed landscape you can imagine. And he said, maybe it will be for me, not for my son, but my grandson. For sure, he will see the vanishing of Israel, and Jerusalem will be us again, will be ours again. So there's people with not two sides, just one. There's no. So you can tell the story of the two most advanced people in the area, but there are thousands of people that are like cans you cannot open. There's no way to tell them there's another side of the story. Is this possible with literature to open this can where there's only one truth and no possible other truth, no other ending of the story?
I don't know if it's possible with literature. I would hope it is, but where it is absolutely possible is with education. And it starts, I mean, freedom begins between the ears, right? Freedom begins in the head. And a part of it is deep in our education system, where we have to start acknowledging our teachers again. The most democratic institute that you have, certainly in the United States or in Ireland, and probably I imagine in Italy too, is a classroom. Where do you get such diverse kids? And I know you have private schools and public schools and so on, but a classroom is a place where people of different backgrounds and ideas come together. Who are the shepherds of these ideas? They are the teachers. Who do we treat badly? We treat our teachers badly. We need to pay them more. We need to acknowledge them more. We need to give them more power. We need to give them more access. And they are the ones who can take the literature or the stories and the storytelling and begin to talk about, broadening the Palestinian engagement with other ideas, broadening the Israeli engagement with other ideas. I mean, a lot of this is intentional. A lot of this is about money. They want to keep people fearful. They don't want people to know one another, because if people got to know one another, they would be outraged about what is truly happening. Do I believe that we can change the structure of what's going on? Yes. Yes, I do. But it's going to take some very brave women and men to do so. And it's also going to take some very complicated truths about one another and some very hard truths about one another. And we're going to have to, balance these things out. And we're going to have to also say, I don't know. We are diseased now with certainty. I mean, everybody is so certain that you're only, a Democrat, or you're only a Republican, or you're only Fine Gael, or only this, that, and the other thing. and yet, it was, it's we're so much more than one thing. We're so much more than Irish, so much more than Muslim, so much more than a particular class. We are, as we were just talking about, we are a complicated smash up of different things, and when we acknowledge that, I think we could begin to acknowledge the necessity to know one another and maybe to begin to change. But you're absolutely right. There are thousands of people. For every person like Rami and Bassam, there are unfortunately thousands of people who say, no,
Yeah.
no, I will not listen.
Listen, you said a lot of people it's too certain, but isn't it possible that they are scared that if you lose this certainty, if you go into the Apeirogon, in the multi-sides universe, you won't have any truth anymore?
Yeah, that's what they're scared of. But that's where the truth is. The truth is that there is no absolute truth. The truth is that there is no one particular truth. It's a really brave thing for people to say and to hold on to. It's terrifying to think so, but it is something that can and probably should be done. In our best selves, we would do so.
Let me be the devil's advocate here. When two people are fighting or two countries are at war, they can't be right. Both of them. It's not possible. So how can you not be on one side when there's something like a war or a fight in the street? One is right, one is wrong.
I mean, there is an occupier and there is the occupied. There is the colonizer and there is the colonized. And I would never say that one is right, but there are ways to understand what is going on that makes it much more difficult to fire a bullet from the back of a Jeep, that makes it much more difficult to walk into a market and to explode a bomb, that makes it more difficult to hate the person just because they have a particular name. So I get it, and I understand it, but I do believe that we can, in the best possible instances. I will tell you this. There's a school in Eastern Kentucky that a very poor school, and a school also in the South Bronx, in New York, also a very poor school. One is white, one is black, and one is Trumpy, the other one is Democrat, whatever. We have all these cliches that come together. They're both now reading Apeirogon, and these kids from Eastern Kentucky are actually traveling in their imaginations to Israel and Palestine, and they realize that this story about Israel and Palestine is actually also about them. It's also about their engagement, about what's going on in their coal mining town and so on. And I do believe that they will come out better thinkers, better citizens, because of reading and discussing the book, not because of my book, but because of their engagement with the issue.
Yeah. I have one last question before we go, and it's a quote you have in the book from Rumi, the poet, and it says, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I have begun to change myself." Are you in yesterday or are you in today? Are you clever or are you wise? You think you can change the world, or simply it's better to continue to change yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great quote. I would hesitate to say that I'm wise, but I would like to think that I'm humble, and I know that I can't change the world, and the only way to change the world to change myself. Yes, but I have to tell the stories of those who change themselves, and I hope that with this book, and then eventually we hope that it becomes a film, that people will look at things a little bit differently, and that's all we're asking for. A little bit to think and to talk a little bit differently than they did before. And that we could be talking about Naples, we could be talking about
Yeah.
Dublin, we could be talking about anywhere when it comes down to that. But yeah, it's a great question. And again, I have to say I don't know.
Okay, but did the writing this story changed you in a way?
Yes,
You
yes.
were a different man before you started writing this, because the two guys said there was a life before Column and after Column, because
Yeah.
telling the
I'm
story to you
constantly,
made them different.
yeah, I'm constantly changing, but this one was a nuclear change in me. Yeah,
Hmm.
this one taught me so much. Um, it was just I don't know, the courage of these two men to
Hmm.
continue going on. They get shouted at, they get called names, they get rumors spread about them, they get lies spread about them, they get blocked at governments, they can't get visas to go places. All of these things happen to them. They have to walk through checkpoints. They have, and they continue to do it. And they know that they are on the right side of history. And this is
Hmm.
incredibly important. And it was one of the things that I discovered also about myself. I knew that this might be a difficult thing to do, but it was the important thing to try to do, and just to continue, on my path, and say I know who I am. I know what I want to say, and yeah, I am a very different person, yes, than I was 5, 6 years ago. But hopefully, my next book too will make me a different person.
Of
Hopefully,
course. Yeah. Very, very, very last, you said there's a movie coming out, in the future when we will shot movie again from this book. Uh, I think it's impossible to make a movie about this book, because this book is not only the story. There are like hundreds of stories. Like it's an encyclopedia in the writing and in the reading, because I learned a lot of things I didn't know. Like I lived in New York and I didn't know the two rabbis went every day to make the wire to the perimeter from Harlem to Brooklyn, and they have to be inside the perimeter. Then when I saw Unorthodox on Netflix and the wire was broken, I was the only person in the audience say, "Oh, I know what is this because I read your book." I didn't know about the chromesthesia. I didn't know about the John Cage Symphony. All of this is essential to the book, and I don't think it's possible to be in a movie, which in a way says, and this is the final word, that literature is something that is only possible when you write. Like you can make words collide in every way. It's impossible to be a director and makes movie collide without special effects, but it's different. This is no special effects. This is the Apeirogon of universe, the Apeirogon of life. Well, everything can be in it. So I will be happy there will be a movie, because your book will be even more, known to people all over the world. But I think the only possible Paragon is this one with the bird on the cover. Yeah.
that's a
Do you
beautiful thing
agree?
to say. I mean, I want to extend the Apeirogon, and if you get, when you get a great director and you get a great screenwriter and you get, maybe they can extend the Apeirogon in a direction that I wasn't able to do so.
Hmm.
And I believe, I got the greatest. I've never told anybody this except my family. Like I got the greatest note from Don DeLillo, who's one of my great
Uh-huh.
heroes.
Yeah.
Beautiful typewritten note. And he said to me, "Well, your book shows that the novel contains everything and is the only form that can actually contain everything." Um, and I'm interested to see what a director can do to prove me wrong or to prove him wrong, that maybe the film can do things that the book cannot do. That's my hope. You know, it was bought by Steven Spielberg, and there are some very clever people behind the screenplay. The families are involved. It's very important.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
The Palestinian families and the Israeli families are involved. And I think that they might do something that surprises us, that disrupts us, that possibly even changes things. The more people who get to hear the story, as you say, the better.
The better is it. Okay.
And I got to thank you for this fabulous interview. And
No,
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Colum. It's always a pleasure. And let's hope next time we'll see each other on Stone Street like the other time. And
I would like to.
It will be a sunny day in New York.
Absolutely, absolutely. I hope so. And you know, my deepest thanks for this and your engagement with the book, which is, you know, obviously very deep and profound.
Thanks to you. All the best for your trip in Florida.
Thank you.